Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Andrew Conspiracy. I have myself, Andrew, and my lovely co host, Mr. Do, and we are here to conspire with you all. And along with that, I just want to encourage for those of you who've been enjoying the podcast to go ahead, don't hesitate to subscribe or send us a like. We always appreciate just those little nuggets of feedback or a comment, anything that would help us better understand how you guys are receiving these episodes. But that being said, we'll go ahead and do our usual starting routine with a little breathing, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about like balance today. So alternate nostril breathing just felt appropriate, and we've done it once, but it never hurts to refine the technique. So with alternate nostril breathing, let's bring the Sanskrit in. It's nadi sodana, and nadi is like channel or like river, and sodana is like purification. So it's purifying the channel. So a little Sanskrit lesson mixed in here, but yeah, we'll go ahead, get comfortable. You can get off the wiggles, but alternate nostril. I like to just put my pointer finger and my other finger, middle finger, up on the forehead, kind of pointing at the third eye, and then your ring finger would be on the left, and your thumb would be on the right. And what you're going to do is do a full cycle in each nostril. So in and out in one, and then in and out in the other. And we'll do 3 rounds because that's what we do. So anyway, go ahead and settle in and breathe in real nice and deep through that left nostril. And then out the same. And then we'll plug the left and breathe into the right. And out the same. And then switch. And switch. And one more. Switch. And in and out to the right. Excellent. Harmonized our brain hemispheres and cleared our channels.
And everybody's smiling.
Yeah. I don't know. I love it. I think it's a great way to get started.
Oh
And
yeah,
you get some poetry for us today?
I do. I think I'm going to start with Syd Banks. No, I'll start with the poem and then I'll do Syd Banks. So, this is a poem that I wrote last night, and it's called "Yes, Fred is Still Dead." Between the end of the beginning and the beginning of the endless, sings the octave of the quantum choir, bringing all vibrations from omniverse, recited by star-eyed creations humming, the frequency of celeste we have yet to achieve as species. In many ways we are primitive, even Neanderthals, but this is encouragement, The heavens have decreed as test of collective ability to unify in the desire not to die. Are you strong enough for immortality? Never knowing the secrets of cosmos, apparently we cannot discover how in the we cannot discover in the avatar upon this gravity well, sadly. So many have had our chance for freedom yanked away. But this is New Deal, more momentous than any day.
Okay. New Dale. What did you call the Earth? A gravity something?
Gravity well.
A gravity
That's
well.
what I call Earth, a gravity
Okay.
well.
All right.
And then, let me see. So this is the latest from Syd Banks. It's chapter I think 1 or chapter 2, and it's called the Theosopher. as opposed to the philosopher. And it goes, philosophers search for basic principles. They gain knowledge by reading books and studying other people's opinions and concepts, then mold them together with their own personal opinions of life. A theosopher's understanding comes from direct experience using his or her own innate knowledge, or if you wish, from what is sometimes called original thought. So that's talking about the balance. If we, that's a good place to start, I think, with philosopher and theosopher. When we talk about balance, because he'll go into this further in the next pages.
So
But
the
basically,
Theosopher is the one who's using more original thought. Is that?
original thought and also like personal experience.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas a
Okay.
philosopher reads and studies and integrates theories from other people into a personal philosophy, but the theosopher comes from within and basically defines experience through his own life.
Yeah, I like that. I feel like I was in philosopher mode for many years, and maybe the last year or so, I've really shifted more into the Theosopher and trying to use my use the tools of the body and emotions and our connection to source to navigate and from my own center as opposed to trying to fit into someone else's mold or someone else's idea of what life is all about. And I think it does. I mean, it feels like a life skill that's going to be required because so much of the internet now is just you can't, it's unverifiable. So,
Right.
and that seems to be our primary source out for philosophizing. So, yeah, learning, and I think that ties into some of what we're talking about too. Is like just our evolution as a species to be able to tap into those finer notes, those quieter messages, those the information that we're receiving through the various channels we have access to.
It's also the other thing is that that this is that we've talked about this a lot about like how people's sovereignty is defined most of the time by other people's opinions. People don't want to think for themselves. I mean, for whatever reason, whether it's just like too much effort or because it's easier to like listen to other people and everything. But this is really like the crux between theosopher and philosopher is that the philosopher takes what other people thinks, meshes it through his or her own mind, and then comes up with a conclusion. Whereas the theosopher takes his personal experience and translates that into behavior that is true to himself, as opposed to having other people like tell him how to think. And this is at the basis of our discussion of sovereignty, which is the basis of this very podcast and the conspiracy. Is I'm not going to go back to old episodes, but my sister is a philosopher. She reads all sorts of things, and she develops her thoughts, and and it is her thoughts, but it's also very much influenced by other people. And one thing I learned early in my therapy and even in the hospital was I have to be true to myself. And if people don't like it, then there's not, I gotta explain myself. If people don't understand me, I gotta explain myself because I meant the the self within knows reality, whereas the self without basically is judging reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, for me, it's like it's a difference between knowledge and logic and and using that as like your framework versus sort of more of this intuitive knowing and actually learning, you learning to use the tool of your intuition to navigate. And to me, it's like, well, the head knowledge and the books and all that are great, but if they don't ever lead to if you don't take them as a part of yourself and then make them your own, you'll never own them in the way that it's like it becomes a knowing, right? There's a difference
Right.
between saying I know this and I've lived this, and once you've lived it, it's so much more concrete and or just like it's more of a foundation. I think a firmer foundation to operate from, where the other can be pushed around maybe a little bit more, or doesn't really know the why sometimes behind what it is they espouse. But
Right.
so I would definitely look to really to connect with the body. I mean that's the end of it, and that probably tilts a little bit towards like a feminine type essence. If we want to break it down into those two categories, masculine and feminine, the feeling into the body and connection with the body feels more like a feminine thing, where the reading the books and the logic and the knowledge feels more like a masculine approach.
Well, uh, to tell you the truth, at this point I'm so confused about what actual I mean. I think I found it in myself, and I for a long time I think I repressed my masculine just because in order to survive I had to be receptive and sort of like compliant with everybody else who had authority over my life. But frankly, it is getting very confusing. And I think this is like part of the modernity, as Pete says. This is part of modernity, but the roles, the masculine, feminine roles, and Gabby talks about this a lot, is, have been so cross pollinated and so that they become confused, so that the power bitch is like seen as as like a archetype or an ideal, whereas actually and the compliant man is seen as a archetype, but this is actually like confusion of like what the true, at least in my opinion, this is my opinion, but it's a confusion of what actually involves the masculine and the feminine. To me, the masculine is not thought or knowledge or logic or anything. It's taking control of the situation and acting in the best interest of everybody possible, so far as you can. And the feminine is receiving the benefits of that protection, that providing, and responding in a loving way in thanks to the masculine impulse.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I'm kind of with you. Like always having to define everything as these two energies and putting them into the categories and all that does seem a little. It doesn't feel necessary to me. I can understand what it is without putting a label on it. Um, I don't know. It must be helpful for some people just to understand better where they are. But to your other point, as far as how it feels like we've gone to boss bitch and metrosexual or something, is or some category like that as like what we perceive as ideal is for sure a distortion. Um, in my opinion, it doesn't from the people that I've encountered, it doesn't align. The stories you hear of women who are really successful in career and business and all that, they can be satisfied, but there still is like this innate desire to be held and contained and protected, and that I think, yeah, that is a valid role of a masculine, and it's not necessarily gender specific, but obviously they tend to tilt towards the gender identity as well. And as a man who's been in a male body this whole run, I certainly can see that. I had a protector instinct, for a long time, but I think it was rooted a little bit more in fear, so that caused it to kind of show up in weird ways. Also, it was selfish from time to time, which isn't really protective at all. And going through this sort of awakening, and I think even cannabis to some extent has kind of helped me better understand what that role is. And in real, like, day-to-day life, what it feels like to me is, if you have a woman, a partner, that you do create a safe space for her to be her feminine self, right?
Right.
And they tend to be more creative and more like expressive, and it
And
you need
that's
a
the
safe space.
masculine role.
Yeah, so you need a safe space to do that, and that's something that I have an opportunity to provide for that feminine, and then I get to feel good that I help this person feel safe enough to really express themselves and lean into their full, true, authentic expression.
Right.
And to me, that and there's an internal component to that as well, right? I need to have a masculine presence that also allows me to be the expressive, creative that I am too. I need a little structure, a little organization, right, to go with the flowy, fun, artsy, whatever, part of myself. So
Right.
I don't know. Maybe that's one. That's how I would describe balance from my perspective, at least.
Well, when I feel, well, there are two things. First off, every person has an equal balance. I mean, ideally, every person has an equal balance of masculine and feminine within. So, and then secondly, you said you feel good because you're providing and everything, but the real payback, the real, like payment of being masculine is you get the full attention of your woman's feminine charm. That's really what it's about. It's not about, well, I bought you this house, and we have a swimming pool and we have two kids and everything. Is I mean that's a very important part of it, but that's just the material part. But the the real core of the masculine feminine dynamic is the man provides so that the woman can be able to show her feminine nurturing not only to her man but also to her children. And this sort of like brings I was just like scrolling today, and I came upon something, and it brings up this subject, which is basically it was a podcast, and they were discussing, should a man pay for dinner on a first date? And the podcast host said, definitely, there's no question. It's part, and then there was this other guy that said, no, it's economic. I don't know where this is going to go with this lady. I don't know her anything, and she should, so we should split the bill. And this is really like sort of like a conundrum about like well, where do you stand? I mean, I've I don't date much. I've never dated much just because of my circumstances. But when when I go out to dinner with a woman, I pay for it. And actually, the last time I had a friend who I used to go out to dinner with often, and then after about like 5 dinners, I suggested that maybe we could like split the bill, and I've never heard from her again since. So that's a dilemma. But on the other hand, I think it is the role of the man. I mean, if the man on a first date, a man should be the provider. And, to say, I don't know how, you tell me what you think about this because
Well, you're setting a precedent to some extent. It's your first sort of formal encounter, theoretically. And so, what precedent do you want to set? Yeah, I would tilt toward. I mean, my rule is whoever made the invitation pays, and
okay,
generally, generally, I am extending. Hey, do you want to go on a date? Usually, you know, I would extend that invitation first. And so then by default, I would pay. But yeah, I guess it 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 does feel like it does represent something deeper, and like you said, it does tend to set a precedent. But to me, then that creates an opportunity to have a conversation about how you each perceive roles in a relationship,
right,
and get on the same page, right? But the first date, first impression, to me, it's like kind of a no brainer. But yeah, I guess if I had a really outgoing feminine and she invited me on the first date, I I wouldn't necessarily say no, I must pay or whatever. I'm not gonna, but but it feels like it's just easier because
right,
if you don't, then you open a whole other can of worms, and
right,
sometimes that's the first date isn't the best time to do that. Uh, in the end, right, a relationship is going to require some sort of balance. If someone is always giving more than the other person, it's just not going to feel good after a while.
right,
So there has to be some sort of balance. It's just it may not be tit for tat, right? It might not be cash for cash. It might be an act of service, and I have a job or whatever, right? Like there's lots of ways you can perceive balance in a
right.
relationship. I also know that keeping score never works because
Absolutely. That's right. And that's
already you're in a
living in the
headspace of,
past anyway.
well, you're already in a headspace of how much is this person contributing? What am I getting, right?
Right.
And as soon as you enter that headspace, you're losing.
And can I
Um,
afford this?
well,
Ye-
you might.
I mean, this is what happened with me. I mean,
I literally can't afford to date you. Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, you would hate to have economics come in the way of love, also.
right,
So there's that, right? If one just happens to be super wealthy and has the ability to pay, then and wants to, feels comfortable in that role, then fine, right? I don't think there's a one size fits all solution. I just think if you're going into a relationship, it's an opportunity to extend love.
right,
Period. And if you see it as anything other than that, you're probably going to have not as good of a time, right? And when you extend love in a healthy relationship, you're going to receive plenty back, and that's how we keep things moving, not who paid for the last dinner.
and the other thing is that do you want to start a relationship off on a transactional basis?
Exactly.
Where you do this for me and I'll do this for you. I mean, is that really like you pay for half your dinner and we'll have a second date, So it's like at what point do you define, at what point does uh process or tradition overcome uh what's right? And I don't have it. I really But
Yeah, I think it's less to do with process or tradition and more to do with people who are really tapped into their innate gifts, right?
right,
Because I just have innate gifts that tilt towards physical work, physical labor. I also love to create and cook, and so those gifts can are useful. And if you find someone who has complementary gifts, then it's not even a question anymore, right? But I think the easy way is to lean into each person's unique gifts and what they tend towards, like their desires, and then the someone's got to do the dishes, that sort of
right,
thing, and that you could sort of hash out and maybe be a little more transactional on, I suppose. But no, a relationship that's transactional is gonna feel hollow and be frustrating at times, and it's just not a great headspace from my experience.
right.
When I was just giving with no strings attached, with a full heart, that's when things work the best. And that's assuming that your partner is on board for that journey as well. But to me, you can learn that pretty quickly if you're paying attention. If
Right.
you're not too focused on some objective, you can kind of see the bigger picture and pick up on some of those red flags. But yeah, I mean, I would be looking for someone who has a nurturing spirit, who wants to create, a family, and build a life together. And what that looks like, I don't really care. Like the details, right? Those seem
Right.
less important. But showing up is like a whole person, right? As opposed to like you complete me, because the
Right.
"you complete me" vibe just it never works super well. You need to be. It's helpful to be like okay by yourself, I think is what I'm saying. Like,
I think that's essential too. You can't have a full blown relationship unless unless both people are fully comfortable and love themselves. And if the other person is looking for love from you to fill a void that they don't have that they have within them, then it's going to be a codependent relationship. Whether it's one or two or both of partners, but ultimately,
well,
I
you have to decide what's right for you. No one else can know your life as well as you because you're the only one who has the information, right? And I get that people will project and say, "Well, you have a mental illness, so you can't." But that's you can think for
well,
yourself.
I
Quite
guess what I'm
comfortable.
saying is the balance between what I get from her and love and feeling of devotion is worth 10,000 times more than the money that I give her. And
Nice.
and that's really my point. It's just like you have to figure out your priorities. Priority, money is a priority for everybody. You can't live without money, but and we aren't going to go into this much more. But basically, in any relationship, you have to figure out, you know, the balance between what you're giving and what you're receiving. And if what you're giving is more than you think you're receiving, then you have to evaluate the relationship and whether to continue it or not. And I think that's basically true for every relationship. And getting back to the masculine and feminine, this idea is that the man, well, a lot, you know, a lot of people are like going back to more traditional uh, ideas about marriage and courtship and everything. And I think that feminism is really sort of like losing its momentum in a lot of ways just because women are starting to realize they don't want to be men. They they don't they aren't. I mean we're equals but we're separate. We're different but we're equal. We're equal but we're different.
Well, we're
And
supposed to be complementary. That's the point, right?
exactly,
Like I have gifts
Right.
that you don't, and you have gifts that I don't. And if we bring those together, we create something greater together. And that's the goal. It's yeah, you're right. Feminism has been. I mean, I'm sure it's created positive outcomes for some people, but in the end, it created more distortion. It feels like, and now that pendulum, like you said, is swinging back a different direction. So hopefully to one that has a little more balance. I'd like to think that men are at least on the edges. Speaking as a man, um, starting to better understand their role in the new Earth too, right? What and understanding what that containment of the feminine looks like, how to actually provide safety to allow this new energy that's coming in to really bloom, and so it's us working together is what creates the new Earth, and so women and men will have to naturally, and the masculine and feminine both, all of it has to work together in order for the optimum outcome to be achieved. And so that's where it gets to like these ideas of roles. But again, I just think it comes back to almost that philosopher versus the others. Like you have to actually, feminism is a philosophy, but when you put it into practice is when you start to find the cracks in it. Like, oh, I actually like having my man open my door for me, or whatever
Right.
small thing it is, right?
Right.
And I want being a boss bitch is exhausting sometimes, or
Right.
whatever it is, right? And so it's like really what is my experience, what is my experience, and what do I desire, and can I pursue that from a balanced perspective without seems like the underlier that distorts all of it, isn't it? It's like
Right.
a protective masculine who's in fear is gonna kind of act crazy and like get into fights or stuff like that, where a masculine who's coming from love is going to allow their woman to express their emotions and not shut down or freak out or feel attacked,
Right.
that sort of thing. And so these are like the new ways of being that I think are coming in, and from a feminine perspective, you know, that yeah, they can go get a job and be the boss bitch, but it if that's not true to who they are, it's never going to feel right. And so if what's true might feel different, it might feel traditional, and that's not good or bad or indifferent. It's just, is it true for you or is it not?
Right.
And can you actually know that for yourself? And then the details don't seem to matter so much anymore, right? We're just living our authentic expression, and we fit together as a result.
Well, I saw something. I don't know if this is true, but it was like I'm always scrolling, and I came across this thing where it was this guy who was interviewing John D. Rockefeller about feminism, and Rockefeller said, "What do you think of feminism?" And guy said, "Well, I think it's great. Women are getting liberated. They're doing what they want and everything." And Rockefeller just said, "You're such a naive fool. The only reason feminism was created was so that we could tax the other 50% of the population that wasn't working."
Yeah.
So, you know, whether that's like apocryphal or true or not, it is like sort of like it is a perspective you can take, and and but
Well, and
the
the crazy
balance
part is we have both sexes in the workforce in many households, and yet our standard of living has not increased perceptively
is
at
gone
all.
gone to the basement.
Yeah, so it does feel like a scam on some levels. I'm not a woman, I can't speak from that perspective, but from a man observing it, it feels like we've given up a lot and gotten very little in return. Now, yeah, the right to vote. Again, I don't even vote. Who gives a shit? Like, it seems like a waste of
Right.
time to me. But and certain rights, you can have a credit card now. Like women couldn't even have like bank accounts at some point. So like there are some good things that have come from it, absolutely. But at the core, at its like human essence, it definitely feels like it's created more distortion and
Well,
in men. It's created distortion in men too, because we don't
right,
know what masculinity even is. It's like
right.
we hear about toxic masculinity all the time, but we don't hear what healthy looks like, or at least not in the mainstream that I've observed.
That's absolutely true, Andrew, and it's it's sad because ultimately, it's driven a wedge between the very basic bonds of all human beings. You know what? And interesting fact, and once again, these are just like facts that I pick up. You know, my friend called me Dougal because I'm so full of facts, but anyway, I picked up this one fact that women who make more money than their man fake orgasms 50% more of the time.
Yikes. Okay.
So that's but you know that's just like a interesting fact. We don't even know if it's true, but
Yeah.
but this this it applies to sexuality, economically, socially, everything, and but um, the role of women is is really well both the role of both masculine and feminine has to be redefined to accommodate the new earth, and I think it's coming about slowly. More and more men are getting aware of what true masculinity is, but until the corporate structure basically collapses or something happens in like the larger matrix, this this conflict between what masculine and feminine is going to continue until people really start getting out of being Neanderthals and being higher men, higher people.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, the Neanderthal. I always think of when I would work, especially in Oklahoma. I'd work with some guys, and we were mostly doing construction in the early phase, and there was definitely this philosophy of just like hitting it harder to fix the problem, and
Right.
brute strength kind of a thing, and I always took a more nuanced approach. Work smarter, not harder. Also, I didn't want to break things, like,
Right.
and so I think that's a little bit of what we're talking about. Is yeah, there was this Neanderthal perspective. I don't know how else to put it. That wasn't very animalistic, very root chakra, kind of vibes. And I'm sure from a feminine perspective, there's a similar aspect. I don't really know what it looks like, but a Neanderthal woman, I don't know. I don't know what that would look like. But bottom line is,
That would be someone with three kids who who hates her husband.
okay, okay, yeah. So the
Just
point is, it's our individual responsibility to evolve for the betterment of the collective, and I think that's what
correct.
you're talking about. Is there are these structures that are out there that seem to be maintaining some sort of status quo, but we can't change the world. We can change ourselves, and by changing ourselves, we begin to change the world. And I think that's what it really comes down to. So it's our individual responsibility to really learn more about ourselves, to better know thyself, and therefore you'll naturally exhibit whatever masculine or feminine traits are innate to you, and then you compare up with the person who complements those things. At least that's That's my theory. I haven't put that into practice yet, but
Right.
it seems like a better strategy than the one I had in my marriage. So I think we're on the right track.
Yeah. Well, I just oh no, this idea is it's all based upon getting beyond the mental and physical to the spiritual, to a higher self, and you know, and it seems like more and more people are getting their and the collective is like basically seeing apparently like getting some sort of like higher consciousness, but it's going. What I'm going to say is that the more you work, the more you work on yourself, the more authentic, the more refined your inner light becomes, the more influence you have in the world. So therefore, I mean, I feel my presence is constantly affecting the world. I mean, just by sitting in the in the dark nest and doing what I do, but being authentic, being my true self, that sends reverberations throughout the world that are beneficial and helpful. And and if everybody like starts thinking in a higher consciousness, then they're going to raise that presence, and the collective presence is going to naturally expand too, and grow into something more concrete.
Yeah, yeah. That's why we're here, right? And we are both creating our own universe, right? And what we're seeing reflected back is supposed to be information to tell us where we are at in our individual evolution. And so I would like to think, to your point, that we do have a coherent field, or at least more coherent than it was in the past. And so that signal is getting stronger, to your point. And well, I I always say I'd rather be optimistic and wrong than pessimistic and right. So my
Right.
optimistic self says, yes, this is true, and we are bringing in the new earth one step at a time, and we do that through loving ourselves and our neighbors and the people that we come into contact with, and that's our job. That's what we do. And if we're doing that, we're killing the game and we're succeeding. And where we fail, then we have an opportunity to look at it and see, what programming might be there, or what shift
Right.
might need to be created in our perspective. But I don't know. What do you think? If we exhausted this
No,
one, did
well,
we get
I want to get back to Theosopher and Syd Banks and Philosopher and everything. It's
okay?
because the philosopher, I mean, our eternal talk about internal versus external. The philosopher is external. He like takes knowledge from others, integrates it, and turns it into his own. Whereas the theosopher takes his experience from within and translates it to and communicates it to other people without filter of other people think of other people's thoughts. So, I think that's like something that a lot of people can think about, because if you're tapping into what Syd Banks calls that inner wisdom, or that original thought, then you are tied in to the whole collective. You are thinking you are thinking in a way that the collective should be thinking. So, and I shouldn't say
Well,
should, but
well, you're offering an example of what you've found that works for you,
right,
and other people can see that and decide if it works for them or not. But I think that's the idea, is just to be a living example of what's possible, what life can look like, and then other people will do with it what they will. But they have at least an idea of what it might look like for themselves.
Well, I think the most important thing is to think for yourself. I
Well, of
mean,
course, of course.
but so many people are like so scared for whatever reason they don't think for themselves. They think they depend on whether it's mainstream news or articles or books or TV or I you know
Well,
is
the
it
programming tells you that, right? The programming
right
says you'll be safe if you conform. And so you're always looking, well, how do I conform? What's everyone else doing? How do I match their reaction? How do I say things that aren't crazy, I don't want people to judge me,
right
and so it's losing the fear of that allows more of that authentic. If you've never said anything crazy to anyone, or if you preface everything, this might sound crazy, let's stop, just say it, who gives a shit,
right
right?
right
Like, and I think that's what you're talking about. But my point is, like, yeah, I'm not saying someone needs to be a carbon copy of my example. I'm saying I've done some work and this is my experience, and you can hear my experience and you can completely disregard it, or you can say, oh, I've actually had a similar experience, or I bet if I tried that I might have a similar result, right? And and because that's part of how we learn too. I mean, we learn a little bit from other people's experience, but that can't be the only way we learn, right?
right.
We
Well,
learning from your own experience is going to be more powerful in the long run.
since this show is about balance, it's like you know philosophy and theosophy. I think Syd Banks basically made them equal, philosopher and theosopher. But you have to like have the outside world and like what people can teach you, and then that's our education system, and education never stops, and you're constantly learning and everything. So I'm not saying don't listen to other people, but you have to like find that balance between the inner experience and the outer teaching, and that's really what I think is really the source of you know integration and happiness is just being able to like and to find a balance between all the dualities that exist on Earth, and obviously that's impossible. You can't find balance between all the dualities, but you can choose where you're going to stand with each duality.
Okay. Yeah, I got a good anecdote from Pete, our good friend Pete, on that one, and he said, like, basically, we are creating reality, and when we go through life, we'll find things and we'll judge them as good or bad, and and then we sit in that duality until we can sort of learn the life lesson that situation or thing was supposed to teach us, and then we integrate that lesson and bring it back into unity. And
Right.
so we're constantly going through that process of understanding how to perceive our world where we don't have to experience like the dual, or we understand duality but from more of like a neutral perspective, I guess. We're not
Right.
constantly judging it, we're just accepting it as it is.
Well, I just I think maybe we could close with a poem, but I also just thought we could I could close with a reflection upon Fred. This is balance because to me Fred was the warlord. He was like the one keeping my light suppressed for like basically 40 years. But on the other hand, he was one of my best friends. He always had my back, and you know, it was my own illness that was making him the enemy when actually he was using his M16 to protect me from the forces that would like take me down or shut me up. And so uh, you know this is a duality of Fred that I'm dealing with, and I'm joyful that the warlord is dead, but I'm very sad that my friend Fred is dead. But the symbol that he represents means more to me than the person that he was. And I guess that's what I'm saying, you know. And that's the balance I'm trying to find with Fred. Is like, because like, well, we won't go into that anymore. But we're almost at time. But that's really like, you know, a decisive balance that I'm trying to find is like how to mourn, but also how to be joyful at the liberation that his death has caused me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know symbols and things are pretty important to you, and you do assign certain values to them. Sometimes I feel like to me that would be a little confusing, but I know it's your process, and clearly you've been doing it for quite some time. But yeah, I hope you find that ultimate resolution and can work through it. But I'm sure it's a process, just like anything else. So
Right. And it's not just a process of balance, it's also a process of grief.
right.
And,
Well, grief feels like a balance though too, right?
right.
It's like present reality versus memory almost, and the memories creep in, and then you remember how you felt when that person was around or whatever, and versus present reality, which doesn't include them, and so there's like a contrast there, but ultimately it is about letting go. I think that is what grief is about is learning to
Right.
process that loss as you're perceiving it.
And well, you know, how many times have I lost a friend who a year later I just think, wow, I'd really like to be able to talk to Chuck, for instance. You know, just but he's not here, and you know that's the process of life. That's life and death, and hopefully we're beyond death now because Fred is dead. So we won't
Yeah.
go into that right now, but why don't I close with a poem, and we'll we'll or do you have any closing thoughts? Well, I'll read the poem and then we'll have closing thoughts. So this is called just inexplicable, incomprehensible youth. I had more energy than the sun as a kid, and so I grew up in joy as the years slid, moving from an ideal to megalopolis until I reached the end point of knowledge to dive into integration with the Lord, which snatched me from the normal, so I was put into intense interrogation by the forces of understanding and compassion, even as Dale by Dale I built the starship that was the goal to create a huge trip through the confines of the vast omniverse where all Earths exist simultaneously, through the through through the concrete wall where God is absolute terrestrial reality we know, a reflection of the future injection, an interjection starting this Dale to unite the new sun, shining as ever down on the sphere where everything is at last being cleansed in the wake of the defeated warlord under whom we all lived in slavery.
It's either dark or deep. Well, I would love to see some of these themes of war and stuff start to fade. That's my personal opinion.
They will. They and this is my conscious my conscious
I mean, you
desire
were
now.
in battle mode for many years. It feels like, right? And doesn't
I've
that
been in battle mode for 50 years. That's why
right? Right. So letting go of
that's
that is
why
the
it's so
process.
hard for me to like get out of battle mode. You know, I mean, this idea of like being attacked or being under attack or being in defensive in the trenches of of metaphysical wars, but now the war is over, and it's sort of like a veteran coming back from a war overseas. You got PTSD. I say my diagnosis now is XCPTSD. It's not schizophrenia anymore. It's extremely complex PTSD, and you can only get it if you've been involved in the mental health system 30 years. So, but basically, the war that I've been fighting with the death of Fred is over, but I'm still hearing the battle shells and the gunfighting and the firefights in my head until it really sinks in that the war's over. But and that's what I'm working for, and I appreciate you saying you'd like to hear about war less, because I would like to speak about war less, but it's just like it's it's a tsunami of cleansing all this energy that's been built up for 50 years that I'm not bitter, I'm not angry, I'm not, but it still takes time to integrate how to deal with the feelings that have been suppressed.
I believe it. Yeah. Well, that's what we're here for. That's what we're doing. We're bringing in more of that new earth vibe, more of that energy, more of those thoughts, that way of being, and it will naturally kind of take care of the process. In my opinion, I
Right.
think
And
it's
I think one last thing in closing is the war isn't over for most people. The war is still raging. And until people start to realize the war is over, then uh, New Earth, or as I prefer to call Gaia. I don't say New Earth, I say Gaia. That's like the New Earth. So until people realize that the war is actually over, Gaia is going to be very ephemeral and hard to grasp. But the more people understand that the war is over, the more Gaia will become manifest.
sounds right. Okay.
So that's is that our show for today? We're almost exactly at 1 hour. So
I think we've done it. Yeah. I think we've
okay.
done.
Well, I'm as I say, I still have my Live Love program for the family caregivers of those with schizophrenia. You can you can you can ask about my books at doauthor25@gmail.com, and just subscribe to this podcast if you like it. If you think it's interesting, subscribe and recommend it. And we're just starting out, but we're determined, and we have a unique point of view, and I think a lot of people need to hear it. And if you're part of the conspiracy, then just keep breathing.
Hell yeah. Sounds good. We love you guys.